What if you had a guide who could tell you how to bridge a gap between who you are today and who you're destined to be? What if each week you could hear a story of someone who has tried and succeeded, or perhaps tried and failed, but learned something in the process? Limitless Spirit is a weekly podcast where host Helen Todd interviews guests about topics and personal stories on defining life's purpose, pursuing personal growth, and developing a deeper faith in Christ.
One of the most sobering questions that I ever asked myself when our kids were teenagers is this question: what if my teenager turns out to be like me? What if they have the kind of relationship with God that I have? What if they handle anger the way I handle anger? What if they grow up and treat their spouse the way I treat my spouse? What if when they have teenagers, they treat them the way I'm treating my teenager? I mean, those kind of questions will help you as a parent know where you need to grow, because we're all growing. None of us are perfect, but God's desire is we become more and more like Christ. And so we want to be moving in that direction. And if our teenager sees us moving in that direction and apologizing when we fail, we're having the greatest impact on their coming to personally put their faith in Christ and become a follower of Christ as well.
Having a teenager in your life is both exciting and challenging. They may appear difficult to understand, and at times just difficult, but they're also a wonderful opportunity to invest your time into and see a beautiful return. Welcome to the Limitless Spirit Podcast. I'm your host, Helen Todd. My guest on this week's episode is Gary Chapman. Gary is a New York Times bestselling author, a pastor, and a counselor best known for his book, The 5 Languages of Love. In my conversation with Gary today, we talk about his latest book, Things I Wish I'd Known Before My Child Became a Teenager. This book tells parents how to help their teenagers navigate the teenage years and become mature adults. We talk about 4 most important social skills a teenager must develop to succeed in adulthood. We also discuss what is happening inside a teenager's brain and how to help them cope with fluctuating emotions, and how we can model Christ-like behavior to our teens. I hope you enjoy this episode of the Limitless Spirit Podcast. Good morning, Gary. Thank you for joining the Limitless Spirit Podcast today.
Well, thank you, Helen. It's good to be with you.
Actually, this is the second time I'm interviewing you for the podcast. I am excited about your new book and the very important topic that it discusses, namely things I wish I'd known before my child became a teenager. And this book is really very relevant to me personally because I'm a mother of a teenager and we're about halfway into his teenage years. He's 16 years old. It is my round 2 of raising a teenager. But as you would probably agree with me, each child is a new chapter. So you start afresh with each child. And so I'm very excited to talk to you about this, and I know that quite a few listeners will be as well.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to discuss it. And as you said, no 2 teenagers are alike, but there are some common things that I think parents need to be aware of.
And actually also some scientific things like the brain development. I have not even thought about that before. So I'm very excited to talk about that. I also think that the modern day teens, which we call Generation Z, they're very unique in terms of they don't know life pre-technology. So they're very attached to technology and dependent in some ways on technology. And I was thinking about that, I know teenage years have always been difficult through centuries. I mean, I'm remembering myself in teenage years, and it probably was the most challenging part of my life. But the uniqueness of modern day teenagers is they really don't need adults. We still depended on the wisdom of our elders, of our parents and grandparents, maybe reluctantly, but we still needed them, for
Yes.
their knowledge and wisdom. But the modern day teenagers, they really go to technology for wisdom Before they come to their parents, they go to Google or Alexa or YouTube, and they pretty much can find any information they need. So how do you think this makes them different from the previous generations?
Well, I think for one thing, obviously, technology exposes them to many, many things that former generations were not exposed to, both good and bad. I mean, there's some wonderful information, online, but there's also some really untrue information online, and there's an awful lot of things that tend to pull teenagers in the wrong direction. And that's why I think, as parents, we need to help teenagers understand that everything you read online is not necessarily true. So if you read something you have a question about, let's talk about it and let's discuss it, and let's see if we can find other information to collaborate whatever idea you happen to have encountered online. So I think keeping the communication lines open with a teenager are really, really important. And I know that sometimes parents say, well, I try to talk to them and they won't talk. I ask them what happened at school and they say nothing,
Especially
so
boys, I think. They just don't like to talk.
Yeah. But the reality is they do need parents. And research does indicate that the greatest influence on teenagers is their parents. Not their siblings, not technology. The greatest influence is their parents. So I think we need to step into that role and recognize that we are needed. Yes, for information, they can turn a lot of places for information. But in terms of what really counts in life and the skills that are going to help them in life, we need to teach them as parents. And they need to see those things in us, because we also know that our model as parents is going to influence them more than our words do. So they're observing how we live our lives. And if they see positive things, it has a positive influence. If they see negative patterns, it has a negative influence. So our model and the way we live our lives is extremely important in terms of influencing the teenager.
Well, this is both very encouraging and scary at the same time. It is good to know that they still need us. It is great to know that we have the ability to influence them, but it is also a tremendous responsibility on us as adults, knowing that the future of our children really depends on who we are, how we live our lives. Let's frame our interview in terms of what are the most important things that we can do for our teenager to help them succeed in life later? Obviously, there are a lot of things that are beyond our control, and we can't always control the environment they're in because they're becoming more independent. We can't always control the information that they receive. So what are the most important things that we can do? And I think you mentioned in your book that there are 4 important social skills that we need to help them to learn. So what are those 4 important social skills?
Yeah, I think it is important to recognize that we're preparing teenagers for adulthood. And the skills that they learn, especially the social skills that they learn in the teenage years, is either going to be an asset to them as they move into adulthood, or it's going to be a liability to them. And so one of those social skills is learning how to express gratitude, because many teenagers in our day, even though they have far more than teenagers have ever had in terms of things, they grumble in terms of things that they don't like about life. And we need as parents to model gratitude. For example, do they ever hear your husband say to you as a wife, honey, I really appreciate the meal you made. Or maybe he made the meal and she's saying to him, I really appreciate you making this meal. It's really, really good. Do they hear you expressing gratitude to your parents or to your friends or to them for things that they do? Because again, our model is going to help teach them gratitude. And in the book, I have practical ideas on how to build these into the lives of teenagers. One, for example, is a little exercise where every person in the family, you put them in separate rooms for 5 minutes with a sheet of paper and a pen or pencil, and ask them just to write down 5 things in that room that they are thankful for. Just simple things, if it's a bedroom, but thank you for the bed, thank you for the carpet, thank you for the lamp, thank you. Just simple things, It's just focusing on the fact that we have lots of things for which we need to give thanks. Then we come back together as a family, and everyone reads their list to the rest of the family. Now we're hearing each other express thanks for these things. And maybe the next week you go back and put them in a separate room, everybody in a different room, and do 5 more things. Just do that for a couple of weeks. It's just getting the whole concept of gratitude on the front burner. But another way is to now go from things to people. So give them a sheet of paper that has a list of each of the names of the family members and ask them to write 3 things that they're grateful for, 3 things they're thankful for about mom, about dad, about sister, about brother, and then come back again and have a conference with the family and let everybody read in front of the whole family the things that they are thankful for about each family member. Because again, we can sometimes complain about family members. But we're realizing, there's some good things about my mother and my father and my brother and my sister. These are just kind of things that help that teenager begin to actually verbalize thanks. And if we model that then in our relationship with them and with each other as mom and dad, we're helping build into them a skill that's going to be super, super helpful to them when they get to be adults. Because no one as an adult likes to be around a grumbling adult, someone that grumbles whether it's raining or whether the sun's shining or it's too cold or it's too hot, No. We want to be around people who have a sense of gratitude. So that's one of the social skills.
I love those exercises. I really am anxious to implement them with my teenager. And this is a great way to get them away from technology just for a few minutes. So that sounds
Absolutely.
like a great game plan. Well, before we move to the next social skill, you do talk about in your book about the brain development and the specifics of the brain development that is important for us as parents to understand. Tell me a little bit more about what is happening in their brain in those years.
Yeah, the brain is actually reprogramming. And one of the results of that is that the teenager is now beginning to think logically about life. We sometimes say as parents, they've become argumentative because they're questioning things we've taught them through the years. But really, it's a positive thing because they're learning to think about things logically. And yes, they're going to ask questions about you. And so rather than trying to squelch that and say, now, wait a minute, that's not true. I mean, you know what I've taught you through the years. No, don't squelch that. If they're questioning you about something, you listen to their question, you hear what they're saying, you help them understand that you want to know, and you're welcome their thoughts and their ideas, because we want them to think logically. Now, please don't hear me saying that teenagers are thinking logically. I said they're beginning to develop the ability to think logically. It's a process that's going to take a few years, but we ought to embrace the process, is one of the things I'm saying in the book, and encourage their independent thinking and ask questions of them, such as, where did you first come across that idea? Maybe they're going to say at school or a friend or on TV or somewhere. Well, why don't we check that out? Why don't we see what we can learn? Why don't you try to see what you can learn about it? I'm going to see what I can learn about it. And let's come back and have another discussion on this topic. So again, you're just walking them through the process of thinking about whatever the topic and finding out all the information you can about it, and then seeing if we are on the same page or if we have different opinions. And it's okay for them to have a different opinion on some things, but if we keep the door open for discussion, we're far more likely to be able to walk with them through the process. Another thing that's happening in the brain is that the emotional center of the brain is fluctuating greatly in those teenage years. So, for example, in the morning, they can be happy and jovial and friendly. And in the afternoon, they come home from school and they're in the pits emotionally. Something happened today or didn't happen today that disappointed them. So ups and downs, highs and lows emotionally are to be expected of the teenager, because that part of the brain is really, again, moving and refocusing. So those are the kind of things I think if I had known that before my child became a teenager, it would have helped me accept those things and learn how to work with those phenomena rather than, pushing back on those issues.
So, how do you cope with these changes in their moods? What is the healthiest way to help them get through it?
I think the one of the most fundamental things is hearing the teenager out, whatever the topic. I remember my son said to me one time, he said, "Dad, I know you're the dad, and I know you have the final decision. I just want you to hear me." So he was saying to me, "Dad, you're not listening to me. You're not even trying to understand my viewpoint." So I think as parents, if we recognize that our teenagers are going to question us and question things that we have taught them through the years, we want to cooperate with that. And we want to say, "I always want to hear your ideas." Now, I do think that we need to affirm that we are the parent and they're the teenager, and that parents have the final word in terms of what we do and don't do in life, and in our family while we're together. So we need to accept our position. We're not authoritarian, but we are in a position of authority. Because if they don't learn to see us as an authority, they will not see the teacher in the classroom as an authority. And one of the most common complaints among school teachers is we can't keep discipline in the room. They don't respect the teacher's position, and they're always interrupting or doing things and they're interrupting other people and all that sort of thing. So helping them understand that, yes, there are authorities in life that we have to live under. And in life, there are rules that we have to follow. If we don't, we suffer the consequences. And so the same thing is true in our family. We have certain rules in our family, and we establish those as parents. And if you don't follow those rules, then you suffer the consequences. For example, on technology, which is a huge issue, how do we handle technology? If you simply let teenagers spend all of their free time on technology, they become addicted to technology. If they play video games with all their free time, they'll be doing that when they're 23 and married, and it will not fare well, with them. So I think we have guidelines, for example. There should be screen-free times. I think one of those times is the meal time. We don't have our phones open and we don't have our screens up during the mealtime. Mealtime, we do two things. We eat and we talk to each other. We don't answer the telephone. We don't have the television going in the background. We eat and we talk to each other. And that can become a really good time for conversation if we have that established, that this is a screen-free time. I think another screen-free time is in the bedroom. I think this is where we really mess out a lot. We allow that teenager to have all their screens in the bedroom at night. They can watch anything they want to watch. No. There are places that we don't have screens. In the bedroom, you can read books or you can sleep. But screens are not in the bedroom. TVs are not in the bedroom. Computers are not in the bedroom. So screen-free places and times. Now, if you haven't had this, will your teenager rebel against it? Yes, they will. They'll say, "Well, I don't like this. All my friends can do." And the answer to that is, "Honey, I'm not the mother of all your friends. I'm your mother. I'm your father. And I have to do what I believe is best for you. And if you violate it, then here will be the consequences." Always tell them, if you have a rule, always tell them what the consequences are if they break the rule. That way, you're not likely to lose your temper at them. You just simply, let them suffer the consequences, whatever that was, and to treat them in a kind way. So I think, understanding that and cooperating with that and having guidelines for them. Teenagers thrive under organization, that there's a time to do homework, there's a time to be online, there's a time to watch TV, there's a time to play games in the backyard, there's a time to play games in the family, inside. Having a structured lifestyle is far healthier for a teenager emotionally than an unstructured, where they just do what they want to do whenever they want to do it. We're not preparing them for adulthood because they will not make it in the working world if they just do whatever they want to do whenever they want to do it. No, we have to teach them that we live within structure, and they thrive under structure.
One of the challenges I feel like that arises for parents during this time in their kids' lives is that they're starting to, along with starting to think logically, they're also starting to question the authority of the adults in their lives. It applies sometimes to parents, it applies sometimes to teachers, and you almost feel like you have to reaffirm or re-earn from them your right to authority. So why do you think that happens, and what is a healthy way to deal with it and reaffirm your authority without being authoritarian?
Yeah. I think a part of it is treating them with kindness in all of our conversations with them. We're not yelling and screaming at them. They lose respect for us when we yell and scream at them. And when we do, we need to apologize and say to them, a father should never speak to a child the way I just spoke to you. And I want to ask you to forgive me. I don't want to do that again. That's not healthy. You just acknowledge it. Sometimes parents say, but if I apologize to my teenager, won't they lose respect for me? My answer is no. They will gain respect for you. They already know that what you're doing is wrong. And when you acknowledge it and you apologize to them, you're also teaching them how to deal with their own failures. You're teaching them how to apologize, which is a huge thing for them to learn. So I think parents have to be open and honest. And sometimes in the middle of the stream, parents look back and realize, I haven't really parented very well. For example, maybe I've been an absent parent. I don't give much time to my teenagers. Or maybe I've been verbally abusive to them or whatever else. Always we can make a difference. And it begins by apologizing. To say to that teenager, I've been thinking about how I've been parenting, and I'm not really happy with the way I've been parenting. I feel like in some ways I've let you down. And you just share with them what you feel and what you perceive, and just say to them, I really want to be a better parent. I want to be a parent that would make you happy to be my child. And so it's that kind of approach, where we deal with our failures. They come to respect us, then we change our behavior. I do think they have to be reminded. I remember during the teenage years of my son, especially, I would say to him once in a while, now, Derek, let's just remember, after we were discussing something, just remember, I'm the father and you're the son. And I have to make the final decision that I believe is best for you. And I want to hear your side. I want to hear what you have to say. And sometimes I'm going to agree with you if I think it's best for you. But I'm not going to agree to do something that I think is going to be detrimental to you. I love you too much to do that. And you would just remind them of that. I don't mean we do that every day, but periodically we have to do that. And if we treat them with dignity and respect, they will come to respect us as a person who's in authority in the home.
That's a great point. So let's talk about the 3 other important social skills that we need to help our teenagers to learn.
One is the skill of asking questions. It's amazing what you can learn when you ask questions. But it's also not only a way to gain information, it's a way to build relationships. And if this teen is going to make it in the adult world, they need to know how to build relationships. And at the very center of relationships is conversation, communication. And when a teenager learns how to ask questions about another person, about their own life, what's it like where you live? What's your dad like? What's your mom like? What's your brother like? Which class do you like best in school? Who's been the worst teacher you've ever had? Just learning how to ask questions of another teenager. They are building a relationship. When you show enough interest to ask another person questions like that about themselves, you're opening the door to the possibility of building a relationship with that person. Because people will talk if you ask questions. They're not going to walk up to you and start telling you all these things about their lives. No. But if you ask questions, expressing interest in them, they will share things about them. And they get to know you, you get to know them. They come to feel like you'd be a good friend. You feel like they'd be a good friend. So you develop a friendship without even calling it a friendship, but you're developing a relationship. And again, the model of the parents is huge. So if there's a mom and dad both in the home, and the mom is periodically in the presence of the children asking the father, what was it like when you were in the 6th grade or the 8th grade or whatever grade they happen to be in? And the dad's sharing some of the things that happened when he was that age. Now, he's not going to just come out with that if you don't ask the question. But if you ask the question, he'll think about it and he'll share some of those things. And the teenagers hears you asking each other questions and asking them questions. They learn to ask you questions. So they may say to their dad one day, Dad, tell me what it was like when you learned how to drive. Was your dad helpful or not helpful? And let him tell you what it was like. So, they learn by doing, but they follow our model rather than saying, you got to learn to ask questions. No, they follow the model of us asking questions. Or maybe they hear us on the telephone having a conversation with a friend, and they hear us continuing to ask different questions in response to whatever the other person is saying and carrying on a conversation. Again, we're teaching them how to carry on a conversation by asking questions. They're observing our model. So learning how to ask questions is a huge social skill.
So we have being grateful, asking questions. What is the social skill number 3?
It is the flip side of asking questions, and that is learning to listen. Learning to give another person your full attention when they're talking. If they're talking to you and you happen to have been on the computer, you just turn from the computer and give them your full attention. You want to understand what they're thinking, what they're feeling. You want to give them your full attention. And we're not, by nature, we're not listeners. By nature, we talk, but we don't listen to other person when they're talking. And again, the model of the parent is the most important thing. Do you listen to them when they're talking? Because if they start talking to you and you're reading a newspaper or you're doing something else on your computer and they start talking and you don't even look at them, you just, listen to them while you're doing some other stuff, multitasking, we call it, then they don't get the sense that they're being heard because your mind is somewhere else. So, give them your full attention. Let's say you're having a conversation with your teenager and your telephone rings. You're going to answer that telephone? It communicates to that teenager, someone out there is more important than I am. No. Let it go to voicemail. That's what it's for. Right now you're having a conversation with this teenager and you give them your full attention. Now, I know if you're a medical doctor or somebody else and you're on call, I know you have to go to the phone. But what you say to them is, this is an emergency, but don't leave. I want to hear what you've got to say. Just hold on. Let me take this call. And you do that. And then you come back to them. You're communicating that you are a good listener. And again, they learn to listen by watching us learn to listen. And it's a huge plus when you come to adulthood and you have this skill of giving your full attention to people, listening to them when they're talking to you, trying to understand their thoughts and feelings before you say anything. You're developing social skills that are going to help them make it in the real world.
I agree with you. These are extremely important social skills. So what is the skill number 4?
It's the skill of expressing kindness to other people. And here's what I mean by kindness. Words and deeds that enrich the lives of other people. Words and deeds that enrich the lives of other people. It's really an attitude of love that's expressed in words and deeds, so that you're thinking in terms of, what can I do to help other people? What can I do to enrich other people's lives? But you take an adult who starts a business and they have that attitude toward life and toward their business. How can my business enhance the lives of other people? Yeah. And what words can I say that will encourage people? They're likely going to be successful in business. But the purpose is not to be successful in business. The purpose is that you become a person who is dedicated to enriching the lives of other people. I was walking across the campus of University of Virginia some time ago. I was speaking in the chapel at a service. And on the side door into Cabell Auditorium, etched in stone above that door were these words: "You are here to enrich the world, and you impoverish yourself if you forget the errand." And I thought, wow, what if every university in the country had that as a motto? You are here to enrich the world, and you impoverish yourself if you forget the errand. Our greatest satisfaction in life is not in getting things for ourselves. Our greatest satisfaction in life is enriching the lives of other people. And that's what we want our teenagers to begin to learn how to do when they're teenagers. So, again, bring them into the kind things you're doing in life. If you go down to the food pantry and work once a month on a Saturday, take your teenager with you. Let them go. Let them bag groceries and things. Let them see what you're doing. Let them be a part of it. If you express kind words to them for anything in their life, or kind words to other people, they're learning how to express kind words to their sister and to their brother and to their parents as well. So I think the whole thing of developing this attitude in life, and this is an attitude, that I want to do everything I can to enrich the lives of other people. So maybe they play basketball, and you see your son who's played basketball, it could be your daughter as well. And after a friend of his missed a shot that lost the game, he went over to him and said some kind words to him. Now, what do you do as a parent? You say, "Johnny or Mary, I saw what you did after George missed that shot. I know he felt badly about it, but you went over there and encouraged him. Man, that is great. I just want to tell you, I really appreciate that about you." So you affirm when you see them say things or do things that are serving the benefit of other people. But those are, obviously there are other skills, but those are 4 really huge skills that are going to help prepare them for being a success as adults.
And so my final question, because most of the listeners of the Limitless Spirit podcast are believers themselves, and they understand the importance of giving their teenagers, their children, the foundation of faith. But it becomes a little more complicated when they become teenagers, because this is the age when they cannot ride on their parents' faith anymore. They really have to make this faith their own. They have to stop relying on their parents taking them to church and actually drive to church, and have that personal desire. So what are the best ways that we can encourage them in developing that personal relationship with Christ?
I think the first thing I would say is let them observe your relationship with Christ. If you have a daily sit-down time with God in 15 minutes or 20 or whatever, you sit down every day, you read a chapter in the Bible with the attitude of, "God, I'm listening to you. I want to hear what will be helpful to me today." And then you read the Bible. Maybe you underline those things that jump out at you. You have a little conversation with God. And they see that as a part of your life. You're modeling for them a part of what it means to be a Christian. It's hanging out with God. It's spending time with God. And at the meal times, let them hear you pray, not just a rote prayer, and let them be a part of that prayer. But the other factor is, do they see in you the characteristics of Christ? I tell you, Helen, one of the most sobering questions that I ever asked myself when our kids were teenagers is this question: what if my teenager turns out to be like me? What if they have the kind of relationship with God that I have? What if they handle anger the way I handle anger? What if they grow up and treat their spouse the way I treat my spouse? What if when they have teenagers, they treat them the way I'm treating my teenager? I mean, those kind of questions will help you as a parent know where you need to grow, because we're all growing. None of us are perfect, but God's desire is we become more and more like Christ. And so we want to be moving in that direction. And if our teenager sees us moving in that direction and apologizing when we fail, we're having the greatest impact on their coming to personally put their faith in Christ and become a follower of Christ as well.
Thank you so much, Gary. I really appreciate you writing a book on such an important subject. I've read in different publications that this generation of teenagers today is somewhat of a lost generation in terms of faith and in terms of church, and it really breaks my heart. And I want to see that change, and I believe that the change should start with the parents, with us who are the most important people in the lives of our teenagers. And so I appreciate the insight and wisdom and the personal experience that you have poured into this book. We're going to do a giveaway. I have a couple of copies of your book to give away. And also we'll post a link for our listeners where they can purchase your book. But thank you so much for talking and for a wonderful interview. I feel like I've learned a few things that I'm anxious to talk to my teen about. And I know that our listeners will as well.
Well, thank you, Helen. I enjoyed being with you. And thanks for what you're doing to encourage and help parents.
I truly enjoyed this conversation with Gary Chapman, and I hope you did as well. Gary brought us so many practical ideas on how to help a teen in your life navigate life and become a mature adult. And I know that I'm going to apply some of these ideas in my own family. But there is so much more you can learn from Gary's new book. Like I mentioned earlier, we're offering a giveaway of Gary's newest book, Things I Wish I'd Known Before My Child Became a Teenager, for the first 2 people who will email me at podcast@rfwma.org. At World Missions Alliance, we believe that changed lives change lives. If you feel called to change the lives of others across the world and help the hurting people, we invite you to visit our website, rfwma.org, for more information how you can become involved. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Limitless Spirit Podcast. Until next time, I'm Helen Todd.
Limitless Spirit Podcast is produced by World Missions Alliance. We believe that changed lives change lives. If you want to see your life transformed by Christ's love, or if you want to help those who are hurting and hopeless and discover your greater purpose in serving Christ through short-term missionary work, check out our website, rfwma.org, and find out how to get involved.